Daniel Cole stood alone in the cemetery as the autumn wind moved through the trees above him. The leaves were turning gold and red, falling slowly around the rows of memorial stones. He held a small bunch of white roses in his hand, the same flowers Laura had carried on their wedding day 12 years ago. 3 years had passed since the day they told him his wife was gone. 3 years since the officers came to his door with their formal words and careful faces. 3 years since his world broke into pieces that he still did not know how to put back together. He knelt before her memorial stone and placed the roses at its base. The stone was simple gray marble with her name carved into it. Laura Cole, beloved wife, lost among the stars. There was no body beneath this ground. The galaxy had taken her and kept her, somewhere out in the cold darkness between the stars. Daniel touched the carved letters of her name with his fingertips. The stone was cold from the morning air. He remembered how warm her hands always were, how she would press them against his cheeks on winter mornings just to hear him complain about the cold. He began to speak, his voice quiet in the empty cemetery. He told her about his week, about the small things that filled his days now. He had fixed the leak in the kitchen sink that she had always nagged him about. He had visited her mother last Sunday and brought her favorite cookies. He had finally cleaned out the garage, something he had been avoiding because her old medical school books were still in boxes there. He paused and took a deep breath. This was the hard part. This was why he had come today. Laura, he said, I need to tell you something. I have been coming here every month for 3 years. I have been talking to you, telling you about my life, pretending that somehow you can hear me. But I know you cannot. I know you are gone. His voice cracked, but he kept going. The doctors say I need to move forward. My friends say I need to let go, and I think they are right. I think holding on to you like this is keeping me stuck in the past. So this is my last visit. This is my goodbye. He stood up slowly, his knees aching from kneeling on the hard ground. He was only 42 years old, but he felt much older. Grief had aged him in ways that time alone never could. I loved you, he said to the stone. I will always love you, but I cannot keep living like this. I cannot keep waiting for something that will never happen. You are not coming back. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and turned to leave. The path back to the parking lot wound through rows of other memorial stones, other families who had lost someone to the vastness of space. Humanity had spread across the stars, but the stars were dangerous. Ships disappeared. Accidents happened. People died far from home and their bodies were never recovered. Daniel had taken 3 steps down the path when he felt a hand touch his shoulder. He froze. The touch was light but firm, the pressure of fingers against his jacket. His heart began to pound. He was alone in this section of the cemetery. He had checked. There was no one else here. Slowly he turned around. A woman stood behind him. She was thin, too thin, with short hair that had grown out unevenly. Her face was pale and there were dark circles under her eyes. She wore a simple gray uniform that he did not recognize, wrinkled and worn from long use. But he knew that face. He knew those eyes. He knew the small scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood accident she had told him about on their 3rd date. Laura, he whispered. She smiled, and it was her smile, the same smile he had fallen in love with all those years ago. Tears were running down her cheeks, but she was smiling. Hello, Daniel, she said. I came home. Daniel felt his legs give out beneath him. He dropped to his knees on the cold path, his mind refusing to accept what his eyes were showing him. This was impossible. This was a dream or a hallucination or some cruel trick his broken heart was playing on him. Laura knelt down beside him. She took his face in her hands, and her hands were warm just like he remembered, just like they had always been. I am real, she said. I am here. I am alive. He reached up and touched her face, half expecting his fingers to pass through empty air. But she was solid. She was real. She was Laura. How he managed to say, "How is this possible? They told me you were dead." They searched for 18 months. They found nothing. Laura pulled him into an embrace, holding him tight against her chest. He could feel her heartbeat, strong and steady. He could smell her hair, different now but still somehow the same. He wrapped his arms around her and held on like she might disappear if he let go. "It is a long story," she said into his ear. "A very long story, but I am here now. I found my way back to you." Daniel pulled back to look at her face again. 1,000 questions filled his mind, but only one mattered in this moment. "Where have you been?" he asked. "For 3 years, where have you been?" Laura took his hands in hers and squeezed them gently. Her eyes held shadows that had not been there before, memories of things he could not imagine. "Time moves differently where I was," she said. "For me, it was only 8 months, but I have so much to tell you. Things happened out there, Daniel, things that changed everything." She helped him to his feet, and they stood together beside the memorial stone that bore her name. Daniel looked at it and then back at his wife, alive and standing before him. "We should probably do something about that," Laura said, looking at the stone. Daniel laughed. It was a strange sound, rusty from disuse, but it was real. He was laughing and crying at the same time, holding his wife's hand in a cemetery where he had come to say goodbye forever. The galaxy had taken her away, and somehow, impossibly, the galaxy had brought her back. They sat in a small coffee shop 2 blocks from the cemetery. Daniel had chosen a table in the back corner where they could talk without being overheard. His hands were still shaking as he held his cup. He had not let go of Laura's hand since they left the cemetery grounds. Laura looked different in the warm light of the shop. He could see the changes more clearly now. She had lost weight and her face was thinner than before. There were new lines around her eyes and a few strands of gray in her dark hair that had not been there 3 years ago. But when she smiled at him, she was still Laura. She was still his wife. "Start from the beginning," Daniel said. "Tell me everything." Laura took a sip of her coffee and set the cup down carefully. She stared at the table for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "We received a distress call," she began. "The Nightingale was on routine patrol near the border when we picked up the signal. A science vessel was in trouble. They were caught in something and could not break free." Daniel nodded. The Nightingale was a medical frigate. Laura had been serving as the chief medical officer. Responding to distress calls was part of their mission. "When we arrived at the coordinates," Laura continued, "we found the ship trapped in what looked like a fold in space itself. The readings made no sense. Space was bent around them like fabric caught on a hook. They were alive inside, but they could not escape. Captain decided to fly in and attempt rescue," Laura said. "We knew it was risky, but there were 46 on that ship and they would die if we did nothing. So we went in." She paused, and her grip on Daniel's hand tightened. "The moment we crossed into the anomaly, everything changed. Our engines stopped working. Our communications went dead. We were trapped just like they were." Daniel felt cold despite the warm shop. He had imagined 100 different fates for Laura over the past 3 years. Instant death in an explosion. Slow suffocation when life support failed. Capture by hostile aliens. But he had never imagined this. "What was it like inside?" he asked. "Strange," Laura said. "Time moved differently in there. We could see the stars outside, but they were frozen, not moving at all. Days passed for us while seconds passed for the rest of the galaxy. The scientists calculated that 1 month inside was equal to about 4.5 months outside. So 3 years out here," Daniel said slowly. "Was about 8 months for us," Laura finished. "I know it does not seem possible, but time is not as simple as we think. They understood it better than we did." She described the early days inside the anomaly. Fear and confusion as both crews realized they were trapped. The Nightingale's crew of 32 humans working alongside 46 scientists to find a way out. 2 ships locked together in a bubble of bent space, waiting for rescue that might never come. "They were patient," Laura said. Their species lives for 300 years on average. They were content to wait, to conserve resources, to hope that someone would find a way to pull them out from the outside. But we could not wait, Daniel said. He knew humans, he knew his wife. Laura smiled sadly. No, we could not. Our supplies would last maybe 2 years at most, and honestly, waiting felt like giving up. The engineers started working on escape plans from day one. She told him about Peter, a young engineer from the Nightingale. Peter was brilliant and stubborn, the kind of person who refused to accept that any problem was unsolvable. He spent months studying the anomaly, running calculations, testing theories. Peter figured out that the anomaly pulsed, Laura explained. Every few weeks it would release a burst of energy as it shifted and settled. If we could time our engine burn perfectly with one of those pulses, we might be able to ride the energy wave out of the fold. The thought it was insane, she continued. They calculated the timing window at less than 2 seconds. The margin for error was almost nothing. They said the chance of success was less than 2%. Daniel watched his wife's face as she spoke. He could see the weight of those months in her eyes, the impossible choices and desperate hopes. We voted, Laura said. The whole crew. They did not understand why we needed to vote, but Captain said everyone should have a say in whether we tried. Every single human voted yes. What about Daniel asked. They were shocked, Laura admitted. They thought we were choosing death over patience. But when they saw how determined we were, some of them started to change their minds. A physician named was the first. He said that watching humans refuse to accept their fate made him question whether acceptance was really wisdom or just fear dressed in pretty words. Laura's voice grew quiet. We made the attempt 4 months ago by our time. Peter calculated the exact moment. Both ships fired their engines together at full power. She stopped and Daniel saw tears forming in her eyes. It worked, he said gently. You are here, it worked. It worked, Laura agreed, but Peter did not make it. The energy pulse flooded his section with radiation. He knew it would happen. He stayed at his post anyway because someone had to manually adjust the timing at the last second. Daniel pulled her close and held her as she cried. He understood now why she looked so different. She had survived, but survival had cost her something. She had watched a brave young man die so that everyone else could live. After a long moment, Laura pulled back and wiped her eyes. There is more, she said. I did not come home alone. They came with me, and they brought a message for Earth. What kind of message? Daniel asked. Laura looked at him with an expression he had never seen before. It was pride and hope, and something like wonder all mixed together. They want to thank us, she said, and they want to offer us something that will change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. Earth Defense Command headquarters stood tall against the gray sky of New Chicago. Daniel had never been inside the building before. He was just a civilian pilot, retired from rescue work after Laura disappeared. But today, he walked through the security checkpoints beside his wife, following her into a world he did not recognize. Commander Grace Porter met them at the entrance to the main conference hall. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and silver hair cut short in military style. She shook Laura's hand warmly and looked at Daniel with curiosity. So this is the husband, Commander Porter said. We have heard a lot about you. Your wife talked about you constantly during the debriefings. Daniel did not know what to say. 2 days ago he had been saying goodbye at a grave. Now he was standing in the center of human military power, surrounded by officers and diplomats and people whose names he saw on news broadcasts. The conference room was large and filled with people. Human officers sat on one side of a long, curved table. On the other side sat beings that Daniel had never seen before in person. They were tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. Their movements were slow and graceful, each gesture deliberate and careful. They wore simple robes of deep purple and sat with perfect stillness as the humans shuffled and whispered among themselves. At the head of the human delegation sat Admiral Henry Shaw, a broad man with a weathered face and calm eyes. He gestured for Laura and Daniel to take seats near the front. One of them rose to speak. A small device on his collar translated his words into English as he spoke, the mechanical voice slightly behind his actual speech. "I am the said. I served as chief physician on the science vessel that your people saved. I speak today on behalf of the High Council." He paused and looked around the room, his dark eyes moving from face to face. 3 years ago, by your counting of time, our ship became trapped in a spatial anomaly. We had accepted our fate. We believed we would die there slowly over many years. Your ship came to rescue us and became trapped as well. His voice through the translator was flat and emotionless, but Daniel could see something in the alien's eyes that looked very much like feeling. "We expected your people to despair as we had despaired. We expected them to accept the impossible odds and wait for death or rescue. Instead, they did something we did not understand. They refused to give up." The turn to look at Laura specifically. "This woman and her crew taught us something about humans that we had not known before. You do not measure hope by probability. You do not surrender because the odds are against you. You fight because fighting is who you are." Admiral Shaw leaned forward slightly. "We appreciate your kind words, but you mentioned something about an offer." Nodded slowly. "Our science vessel was carrying researchers who had developed a cure for the plague. This disease has been killing 3 species in the outer systems for decades. Millions have died. Millions more would have died if our researchers had perished in the anomaly." He paused to let the weight of his words settle over the room. Because of human courage, those researchers lived. Because of human refusal to accept death, the cure will save billions of lives across the galaxy. We owe you a debt that cannot be measured." The room was completely silent. Daniel looked at Laura and saw tears in her eyes again, but this time they were different. This time she was proud. "The High Council wishes to offer humanity 2 gifts," continued. "First, we will share our medical technology with your species. Our knowledge of healing is centuries ahead of your own. We will teach you everything we know." Several of the human officers exchanged glances. Daniel understood their surprise. Alien species rarely shared technology with humans. Most considered humanity too young, too reckless, too dangerous to trust with advanced knowledge. Second said, "We offer humanity a permanent seat on the Galactic Medical Council. This body governs healthcare policy across 47 star systems. Until now, humans have been observers only. We propose to make you full members with voting rights." Admiral Shaw's expression remained neutral, but Daniel could see the tension in his shoulders. This was bigger than technology. This was political power on a galactic scale. "Why?" the Admiral asked bluntly. "Other species have kept us at the edge of galactic affairs for generations. They say we are too new, too unpredictable. Why are you offering us this now?" Was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his translated voice seemed softer somehow. "I spent 8 months with humans inside that anomaly. I watched them work impossible hours to find an escape. I watched them share their food and water with my people even when their own supplies ran low. I watched a young man named Peter give his life so that everyone else could live." The looked directly at Admiral Shaw. "We live for centuries. We have learned to be patient, to wait, to accept. But patience would have killed us in the anomaly. Your people saved us because they refused to accept death. They fight even when fighting seems pointless. They sacrifice themselves for strangers." Spread his hands in a gesture that seemed almost human. "The galaxy needs this. The galaxy needs you, not despite your recklessness but because of it. You remind us that life is worth fighting for even when the odds say otherwise." Laura stood up slowly. Daniel watched her step forward to stand beside. "I know some of you are wondering if this is real," she said to the room. "I know it seems too good to be true, but I was there. I saw who had given up learn to hope again because humans refused to quit. This is not charity. This is recognition. They finally see what we bring to the galaxy." She looked at Admiral Shaw with steady eyes. "We are not children anymore. We have earned our place at the table, and I think we should take it." The room erupted in discussion. Daniel sat quietly and watched his wife stand tall among admirals and aliens, speaking for humanity. She had left Earth as a medical officer on a rescue mission. She had returned as something more. She had returned as a bridge between worlds. The apartment felt strange to both of them. Daniel had lived here alone for 3 years, filling the spaces Laura left behind with silence and routine. Now she walked through the rooms like a visitor, touching objects she once knew, looking at photographs that showed a life she had missed. Daniel watched her from the kitchen doorway as she stood before their wedding picture on the living room wall. She traced the frame with her fingertips, her face unreadable. "I look so young," Laura said quietly. "Was I really ever that young?" Daniel crossed the room and stood beside her. The photograph showed them on the beach where they got married, laughing at something the photographer had said. Laura's dress was blowing in the wind, and Daniel was trying to hold his tie down with one hand while reaching for her with the other. "That was 11 years ago," Daniel said. "We were both younger then." Laura turned away from the picture and sat down on the couch. She looked exhausted. The past few days had been filled with meetings and debriefings and medical examinations. They had confirmed that she was healthy, that the anomaly had not damaged her physically. But Daniel could see that something else was wrong. He sat beside her and waited. He had learned patience during the years she was gone. He had learned that sometimes people needed space to find their words. 15 people did not make it out," Laura said finally. 15 humans and 23 died inside the anomaly before we escaped." Daniel took her hand but said nothing. "Most of them died in the early weeks," she continued. "Equipment failures, accidents. One man had a heart attack and we did not have the right medication to save him. Fell during a repair job and broke her spine." She stared at the floor as she spoke. "But some of them died in the escape. When Peter fired the engines at full power, the energy pulse hit harder than we expected. 3 sections of the Nightingale lost pressure instantly. 4 of my friends died in seconds." Daniel squeezed her hand gently. He did not offer words of comfort because he knew there were none that would help. He simply let her know he was there. "I keep seeing their faces," Laura said. "When I close my eyes, when I try to sleep, I see them and I wonder if I could have saved them. I was the chief medical officer. I was supposed to keep everyone alive." "You did keep everyone alive," Daniel said. "Everyone who survived is alive because of you and the crew." Laura shook her head. "Peter was 26 years old. He had a girlfriend back on Earth who was waiting for him. He showed me her picture once. She had red hair and freckles, and he said he was going to marry her when we got home." Her voice broke slightly. He knew the radiation would kill him. The calculations were clear. But he stayed at his post because someone had to make the final adjustments manually. The timing had to be perfect or no one would escape. Daniel remembered what Laura had told him in the coffee shop. He remembered the young engineer who had figured out the escape plan and then died to make it work. "He was a hero," Daniel said. "He was a kid," Laura replied, and her voice was sharp with grief. "He was a kid who should have had 50 more years of life. He should have married that girl with the red hair. He should have had children and grown old telling stories about his adventures in space." She pulled her hand away from Daniel and stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the city lights below. "They want me to serve as an ambassador," she said. "They want me to represent humanity on the Galactic Medical Council. They say I understand both species now. They say I can build bridges." Daniel watched her silhouette against the window. "That is a great honor," he said carefully. "I know it is," Laura replied, "and I want to do it. I want to make sure Peter's death meant something. I want to prove that humans deserve the trust they are placing in us." She turned to face him. "But I am afraid, Daniel. I just got home. I just found you again. If I take this position, I will have to leave. I will have to go back out there to the edges of explored space where the Council does its work." Daniel felt his heart tighten. 3 years of grief had taught him what loss felt like. The thought of losing her again, even temporarily, made him want to beg her to stay. But he looked at his wife and saw something in her eyes that he recognized. It was the same fire that had made her become a doctor in the first place, the same drive that had pushed her to join a rescue ship instead of working in a comfortable hospital. Laura had always needed to help people. It was who she was. He stood up and walked to her. He took her hands in his and looked into her eyes. "You have to go," he said. Laura's face crumpled with surprise and something like relief. "What?" she whispered. "The galaxy needs to see what humanity really is," Daniel continued. "Not the reckless newcomers that other species think we are. They need to see people like you, people who walk into the dark to bring others home." "But what about us?" Laura asked. "What about everything we lost?" Daniel smiled, and it was the first real smile he had felt in years. "We did not lose anything," he said. "We gained 3 years of perspective. We learned what matters and what does not. And now we have a chance to show the galaxy what humans are made of." He paused and took a breath. "Besides," he continued, "who says you have to go alone?" Laura stared at him. "What do you mean?" "I used to be a rescue pilot," Daniel said. "I am pretty sure the Galactic Medical Council could use someone to fly their emergency response ships, if they will have me." Laura laughed through her tears. She pulled him into an embrace and held on tight. "I love you," she said into his shoulder. "I love you too," he replied, "and I am not letting you out of my sight again, not ever." They stood together in their apartment as the city lights flickered outside. Two people who had been separated by time and space and grief, finding their way back to each other. Two people ready to face the galaxy together. 6 months had changed everything. Daniel stood on the observation deck of the medical station, watching ships come and go from the docking ports below. The station orbited a pale blue gas giant at the edge of explored space, a place where the stars seemed closer and brighter than anywhere he had ever been. He wore a simple gray flight suit now, the uniform of the Emergency Response Corps. His certification had taken 3 months of intensive training, learning to fly ships that moved differently than anything humans had built. But he had earned his place here. He had proven himself in a dozen emergency runs across 4 star systems. Laura found him on the observation deck as the evening shift began. She wore the dark blue robes of a council ambassador, modified slightly to fit human proportions. She looked tired, but there was a light in her eyes that Daniel loved to see. "Long day?" he asked. "Long week," she replied. "The council has been debating supply distribution protocols for the outer colonies. Some species believe we are favoring human settlements." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Are we?" Laura smiled. "Maybe a little, but only because human settlements are growing faster than anyone expected. More humans are moving to the frontier every month. The council was not prepared for how quickly we would spread." She leaned against the railing beside him and looked out at the stars. "Sometimes I forget how far we have come," she said. 20 years ago, humans had barely reached our own moon. Now we have people living on 100 different worlds." Daniel nodded. He thought about Earth, so far away now. He thought about the cemetery where he had said goodbye to a grave that held no body. That life felt like it belonged to someone else, someone smaller and sadder than the man he had become. A chime sounded across the station's communication system. Daniel recognized the tone immediately. Emergency alert. Laura's posture changed in an instant, her tired slouch becoming sharp attention. They both ran for the command center, joining the flow of crew members responding to the call. The command center was a large circular room filled with screens and consoles, and humans worked side by side, their voices overlapping in a dozen languages as the translation system struggled to keep up. Admiral stood at the center, his tall form commanding attention. He had been promoted after the events in the anomaly, recognized as a leader who understood both patience and action. "We have received a distress signal," announced. "A plague outbreak on Colony 7 of the Meridian System. Initial reports suggest rapid spread with high mortality." The screens around the room filled with data, population numbers, infection rates, projected casualties. Daniel felt his stomach tighten as the numbers climbed higher and higher. "The colony has requested immediate assistance," continued. "They need medical supplies, personnel, and evacuation support for critical cases." A council member spoke up from across the room. "The Meridian system is 3 days away at maximum speed. By the time we arrive, the outbreak could spread to neighboring colonies. Standard protocol suggests quarantine until the disease burns itself out." Several other aliens murmured agreement. Daniel recognized the pattern: patience, acceptance, wait for the storm to pass rather than sailing into it. Laura stepped forward. "Standard protocol would condemn 80,000 people to die alone," she said. Her voice was calm but firm. "They are right that the disease might spread if we send aid, but humans do not abandon people because saving them is difficult." The council member turned his large dark eyes toward her. "Ambassador Cole, your passion is admirable, but mathematics does not care about passion. The risk of spreading the plague to other systems is significant." Laura did not flinch. "Then we quarantine our own ships. We send a team that stays until the outbreak is over. No one leaves until the disease is contained." She looked around the room at the mixed crowd of humans and aliens. 3 years ago, a human engineer named Peter gave his life so that strangers could escape a trap that should have been impossible. He did it because he believed that some things matter more than survival. He believed that helping others is worth dying for. Laura's voice grew stronger as she spoke. "I have watched humans and worked together on this station for 6 months. I have seen what we can accomplish when we combine wisdom with human determination. This plague is a test, not just of our medical abilities, but of what we believe. Do we believe every life is worth fighting for, or do we only believe it when fighting is convenient?" Silence filled the command center, looked at Laura for a long moment, then turned to face the council. "I spent 8 months trapped in a fold of space with humans," he said slowly. "I watched them refuse to die when every calculation said they should. I learned something from them that I had forgotten in 3 centuries of life. I learned that numbers are not the only truth." He straightened to his full height. "I vote to send the relief mission. Who will join me?" One by one, hands rose around the room, and humans together choosing action over acceptance, choosing hope over mathematics. Daniel raised his hand along with the others. When the vote was counted, the mission was approved. An hour later, Daniel stood in the hangar bay beside his ship. It was a fast medical transport designed to carry supplies and evacuate critical patients. Laura was nearby, helping organize the medical team that would travel with the fleet. She walked over to him as the final preparations were completed. "Be careful out there," she said. Daniel smiled and pulled her into an embrace. "We will be back," he said, "all of us. That is what humans do. We come home." She kissed him and stepped back. "Then go save those people." Daniel climbed into his ship and began the startup sequence. Through the canopy, he could see the rest of the fleet forming up. 12 ships carrying medicine, doctors, supplies, and something more important than all of those things combined: They were carrying proof that humans would always answer when someone needed help. As the fleet prepared to depart, Daniel noticed a small plaque on the wall of the hangar bay. It was a memorial to those who had died in service to the medical station. Peter's name was there, along with others from the Nightingale. Daniel had walked past this wall 100 times, but today he paused. He pressed his hand against the cold metal and made a silent promise. Your sacrifice meant something, he thought. We are proving it every day, every life we save, every hand we reach out, every time we refuse to give up. Laura joined him at the memorial. She took his hand and squeezed it gently. Ready? She asked. Daniel nodded, ready. The fleet launched into the darkness between stars. Behind them, the station glowed like a beacon against the void. Ahead of them, 80,000 people waited for help that many had said would never come. But humans had come anyway, because that was what humans did. The stars watched them go, and the stars remembered.